Asterisk my fiancé left me in a hospital parking lot while my brother was dying inside. No warning, no goodbye. Just his phone, my purse, and a voicemail that said, "Don't follow me. I've made up my mind." And the crazy part, that voicemail was just the beginning, because what I found out the next morning nearly broke me. I was supposed to be getting married in 5 weeks. Instead, I was sitting in a plastic chair under a flickering emergency room light while my older brother, Greg, lay unconscious from a motorcycle crash. He was the one who raised me after our mom passed. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to do taxes, how to stand up for myself. And now, he was hooked up to machines I didn't understand, pale and quiet like someone else entirely. My fiancé, Nolan, was supposed to be with me, supportive, present, but the minute we parked, he tossed me the keys and mumbled, "I'll be back." That was 4 hours ago. I called, I texted, nothing. I assumed he just needed space. Hospitals made him nervous. He lost his dad to cancer a few years ago, and ever since then, he hated the smell of antiseptic and the sight of tubes. Still, something felt off. I finally walked out of the hospital around 2 a.m. to grab something from the car and saw that it was gone. Vanished. No texts, no missed calls. Just a voicemail that played automatically as I stepped off the curb. "Avery, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Don't come looking for me. I've made up my mind. I'll send for my things. Please don't make this harder." My heart slammed into my ribs. I just stood there in the middle of the empty parking lot, shivering, frozen. What was he talking about? I rushed back inside, still in shock, and asked the nurse if she could call me a rideshare. I didn't even have my wallet. Nolan had insisted on holding onto it earlier because my clutch didn't match the dress. What a joke. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed by Greg's side, watching his heart monitor beep like it was mocking me. 1 beep for each betrayal. When the sun rose, I called my best friend Cammy. She showed up with a coffee in one hand and her eyes already full of fire. "Girl, don't scream," she said. "But I think you need to sit down." She handed me her phone. There, on a random Facebook group for destination weddings, was a picture posted that morning. Nolan. Smiling. Arm wrapped around a girl I'd never seen before. Caption: "Can't believe we pulled it off. New beginnings, baby." The comments, even worse. His mom had commented, "So proud of you too, finally following your heart." His mom knew. Cammy looked me dead in the eye and said, "I think this wasn't random. I think they planned it." The rage hit before the tears did. I started to hyperventilate. The nurse came over and offered me water, thinking I was upset over Greg's condition, which I was. But this was something else. Then Cammy added, "Avery, you need to see this too." She showed me a post from a wedding photographer's Instagram story. 2 hours ago. Nolan, again, in a suit. At a small beachside ceremony. Not our ceremony, but a wedding. My fiancé got married to someone else, while my brother was fighting for his life. What kind of person does that? I couldn't even breathe. My whole body shook. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. The question started spinning in my head. Did he ever love me? How long was this going on? How long was I blind? I pulled up our shared calendar. Every single date for our wedding, the venue deposit, the tasting, the tux fitting was still in there. Then I noticed something new. An event added 3 days ago, final move out. That's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. He had planned to abandon me here. He knew I'd be too distracted with Greg in the hospital. He used it as cover to slip away, clean and quiet, while I dealt with tragedy. Who does that? And how the hell was I supposed to move on from it? I spent the next hour calling his mom. No answer. Calling him. Straight to voicemail. Calling his work. He no longer works here. I went to our apartment. Empty. No note. No trace of his things. Not even his toothbrush. Only one thing was left on the counter. A box labeled for Avery. I opened it. Inside was the engagement ring and a printed invoice for a honeymoon trip to Turks and Caicos. Not with me, with her, booked 2 weeks ago. That's when I stopped crying. I stood in my living room and something inside me snapped. He thought he could walk out of my life like I was just a canceled reservation. He thought he could replace me without consequences. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to break. I was going to burn. But first I needed to find out who she was, and why Nolan had thrown away 5 years of our lives for a stranger, unless she wasn't a stranger at all. And what I discovered next, let's just say I wasn't the only woman he had lied to. But here's my question to you. If the person you love vanished and married someone else overnight, what would you do? Would you let them go quietly, or would you fight to make them regret it? Asterisk. Turns out, the stranger Nolan married wasn't a stranger at all. She was my coworker. Not just any coworker, the one who always complimented my lunch, laughed too loud at my jokes, and once cried on my shoulder about her cheating boyfriend. Her name was Betrayal. She worked 2 floors down in marketing. Petite, loud, too many bracelets. I used to think she was harmless. And now, she was my replacement. Same ring. Same dress style I picked. Even the wedding arch I'd shown Nolan 6 months ago on Pinterest, she used that exact photo. It was like watching someone live your life on purpose. I felt sick. Cammy and I did what any reasonable woman in a post-apocalyptic betrayal state would do. We stalked. Deep. Internet deep. Turns out Nolan and Betrayal had been following each other for over a year, commenting on each other's posts, private jokes, inside references. At first, I thought, maybe it's nothing. Then I found the messages. He forgot to log out of his work Slack on my old laptop. That thing had been collecting dust since I quit remote accounting, but I fired it up half out of desperation, and there they were. Months of messages. Flirty at first, then sexual, then downright sickening. Nolan, I wish I was coming home to you tonight. Betrayal, soon, baby. Just a little longer. She's so distracted with her brother in the hospital, she won't notice anything. I nearly threw the laptop across the room. They used my brother's trauma as a cover for their affair. I couldn't think. I couldn't sit still. My hands were trembling, not from sadness anymore, but from pure, concentrated rage. That's when Cammy said something that flipped a switch in me. She looked up from her phone and said, "You know, their wedding isn't even legally binding." What? I blinked. They didn't file the license yet. Look. She pulled up public court records. Nothing under Nolan's name. No application. No filing. Nothing. They staged the whole thing for photos and Facebook clout. A lie to kickstart a fake life. A honeymoon built on cheating and debt. Because yeah, the honeymoon. The trip Nolan booked to Turks and Caicos. It was on my credit card. He used our joint account. The one we'd opened for wedding expenses. He must have transferred everything right before he left. $6,000. Gone. He left me for another woman and made me pay for their romantic getaway. I didn't cry this time. I laughed. A low, hollow laugh. Because suddenly, everything was clear. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to destroy the fantasy life they thought they'd built. But I had to be smart. First, I filed a fraud report on the credit card. Then I froze the joint account, changed every password I could think of, and locked down my personal bank. Next, I sent screenshots of the Slack messages to his new boss. Because guess what? He didn't quit his job, he transferred to a new one, a shiny marketing firm his cousin worked at. I found his LinkedIn update that morning, and I made sure it didn't last long. I also sent the messages to HR at my office. Betrayal had violated more than one workplace conduct policy, romantic involvement with a former fiancé of a coworker. That was not going to look good for her, but I wasn't done. I booked a fake call with Nolan. I used a burner app, changed my number, pretended to be a vendor offering free honeymoon excursions. He answered immediately, probably thinking he was getting a yacht upgrade. I said, "How does it feel, Nolan?" Silence. Then Avery, "I hope your honeymoon is fun," I said sweetly. "You might want to check your email before checkout. And your bank. And maybe, just maybe, your job security." His voice cracked. "What did you do?" I hung up. Then I turned off the burner phone and went to check on Greg. Because in the middle of this mess, I'd forgotten the most important person in my life was still fighting to wake up. I sat beside him, holding his hand. "I'm okay now," I whispered. "You don't have to worry about me anymore." And that's when his fingers twitched. Just once, but enough for me to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were both going to be okay. 2 days later, the dominoes started falling. Nolan's job gone. His boss had reconsidered the hire after the screenshots went viral inside the company's Slack. Betrayal, suspended pending internal review. And the wedding post, deleted. But not before hundreds of people, friends, coworkers, even his family saw the receipts I posted in the comments. No swearing, no rage, just hard evidence and quiet destruction. He tried calling again. I let it ring. Then I blocked him. Cammy and I drank cheap wine on my porch that night, watching as the wreckage settled into silence. She turned to me and said, "You know what would be crazy? What? If this wasn't the first time he did this." That thought chilled me to the bone. Had he done this before? Had I missed other signs? And if Betrayal wasn't his first affair, then how many other lies had I lived inside without even knowing? But I'll save that for tomorrow. Because what I found next, it changed everything. Again. And here's a question for you, reader. If you found out your ex used your family's tragedy to cheat and flee, would you expose them? Or would you let karma handle it? What would you do? Cammy was right. This wasn't the first time Nolan did something like this. I found out 2 nights later, on my brother's couch, with a box of saltines in one hand and my laptop on my knees. Greg had finally been moved out of ICU. He still wasn't talking much, but he was awake, aware, and gave me a slow thumbs up every time I walked in. That's all I needed for now, but I couldn't stop thinking about Nolan, not because I missed him. That part of me was dead, burned out like a match dropped in a puddle. It was because something didn't add up. He didn't just run away. He escaped, as if he'd done this before, as if he already knew how to vanish. So I typed his full name into an old Facebook group one used to follow during college, Women Who Warn Women. It was one of those support networks where people post about exes who ghost, cheat, steal, lie, scam, or worse. I wasn't expecting much, but then a post popped up. Does anyone know Nolan Ferris? Late 20s, works in media, dated him in Indiana. He vanished a week before our engagement party, took money and left a voicemail saying he had to follow his heart. Never heard from him again. The post was over 2 years old. Same guy. Same voicemail. Same pattern. There were 4 replies. 4 different women, different cities, different jobs. Same story. Each of them said some version of, he love bombed me, promised a future. Then, right before something big, engagement, moving in, pregnancy scare, he just disappeared. Always during a crisis. One woman said he left the morning after her father died. Another said he ghosted her on her birthday. I just sat there, cold, numb. This was what he did. He targeted women at their most vulnerable, built them up, got access to their lives, money, plans, and then slipped out when it got too real, always making it seem like he was the victim, like he was overwhelmed, like he was finally being honest. It wasn't just cheating. It was emotional theft. I messaged all 4 women. 3 replied. 1, named Lena, even offered to video chat. She told me he lived with her for 4 months, said he loved her, talked about kids, then vanished the day she had surgery on her knee. Took $800 and left behind a sticky note that read, "You'll be okay. I believe in you." No contact since. I told her what happened to me. By the end of the call, we were both crying, not because of him, but because of how stupid we felt. Not stupid for loving someone, but stupid for trusting someone so hollow. Then Lena said something I'll never forget. You know what would help us both? If other women knew about him before it was too late. That's when the idea started to form. Not revenge, awareness. I didn't want to destroy Nolan's life. He'd already done that himself. I wanted to warn the next person before they became the next ex-fiancé in a hospital parking lot. So I wrote a post. Not bitter, not dramatic, just facts. Title: If you're dating a man named Nolan Ferris, please read this. I wrote about how we met, the proposal, the way he left, the wedding scam, the credit card fraud. I did screenshots, the Slack messages, the wedding posts, the honeymoon invoice. I kept it clear and respectful. No insults, no threats. Just truth. It spread fast. By the next morning, it had over 7,000 shares. People in the comments were tagging their friends. One woman even said, "Oh my god, I went on to dates with him last month. He told me he was single but acted weirdly rehearsed when he talked about past relationships." Another said he'd matched with her on a dating app last week. He was already trying again. The post made it to Reddit, then TikTok. A creator stitched it with the caption, "The fiancé fugitive, y'all. This man is out here treating engagements like lease agreements." That's when Nolan finally broke silence. He emailed me. Just one line, "You're ruining my life." I stared at the screen. Ruining his life? What about mine? What about the future he promised me? Then dropped like trash the second real life showed up. I didn't reply. He made his choices. All I did was tell the truth. A few days later, Brielle emailed me. It was long, rambling, full of excuses. She said she didn't know he was engaged to me, that he told her I was controlling and that our relationship had ended months ago, that he said I was unstable, obsessed, and wouldn't leave him alone. My stomach twisted, because that's what abusers do. They twist the narrative to make you look like the problem, while they skip town and start over like nothing happened. I told her the same thing I'd told the others, "You're not the first, but you can be the last." She didn't reply, and I didn't care. Greg came home from the hospital a week later. We sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the sun dip behind the fence. He looked thinner, tired, but alive. "I heard about everything," he said quietly. I braced myself. Then he added, "I'm proud of you." That broke me. I leaned against his shoulder and sobbed like a child, because despite everything Nolan tried to take from me, he didn't win. I was still standing, still breathing, still me. 3 weeks passed. The storm Nolan left behind was finally calming. The viral posts died down. Brill deactivated her accounts. My fraud claim was approved. And Greg? He was walking with a cane now, slow but steady, with that same quiet stubbornness he's had since we were kids. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. I moved in with Cammy for a bit, just until I could find a new place. Our apartment, mine and Nolan's, felt haunted. Every room whispered his name. The kitchen still had coffee stains from his favorite mug. I couldn't bring myself to scrub them. So I left. I started small. Morning walks, grocery lists, reading old cookbooks. Slowly, I was reclaiming the little pieces of me he never cared to know, until something strange happened. Kemi was helping me sort through boxes I'd left in the storage unit behind our building. I hadn't been there in months. I thought everything in there was mine: college stuff, winter coats, Greg's old speaker. But buried under a crate of tangled extension cords, we found a small plastic bag with a key inside. A bright orange tag was taped to it. On the tag, in Nolan's handwriting, were for numbers 9124. I blinked. "Do you recognize this?" Cammy asked. "No, but I know that handwriting." We assumed it was some old locker key or mailbox we forgot about, but my gut told me otherwise. I Googled the number. Nothing came up. Then I remembered, when Nolan first moved in, he insisted on renting a second storage unit just in case. Said he wanted to keep his film gear there and stuff from before me. I'd never seen it. He always handled it alone. The next morning, I called the most likely place, the storage facility a mile from our apartment. When I gave them the number, they paused out double quotes. "Yes, that's an active unit," the woman said. "Rented under in Ferris. Would you like to schedule access?" My heart thudded. I didn't tell Cammy. I went alone. The woman at the desk handed me a clipboard and waved me through the metal gate. I walked past rows of identical units until I found it: -9124. The key fit. It clicked out. The door creaked open, and what I saw inside made me step back. It was alive, but not mine. Inside were framed photos, wedding decor, a box labeled Jenna stuff to return, a suitcase filled with men's clothes and women's jewelry. Another one labeled Linda not safe to keep. Each suitcase was different, labeled, stored. Organized. I felt like I was staring into a serial dater's graveyard. There were 3 old phones, an envelope of printed emails, dozens of notebooks, one journal sat on top, leather-bound, used. I opened it. Inside were entries in Nolan's handwriting, long ones, some poetic, some dark. One line stood out, circled in red: "I don't lie. I transform. They fall in love with what they need, and I become it." My mouth went dry. This wasn't a man who made mistakes. This was a man who trained himself to deceive. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about manipulation, patterns, control. He'd done this before. Jenna, Linda, and God knows who else. I snapped pictures of everything. Then I backed out of the unit and closed the door. I drove straight to the police station. The officer at the front desk listened carefully. I showed him the photos. He asked if anything was stolen, if I was in physical danger. "No," I said, "but I think he's dangerous in a different way." He nodded. "We've had reports like this before. Unfortunately, emotional fraud is hard to prosecute unless there's clear financial harm or identity theft. I filed a fraud claim already. He used my card. Then that's something. He gave me a detective's card. Keep documenting. If he contacts you again, let us know." I left feeling conflicted, like I had just discovered a fire, but no one could touch it until it burned someone else. That night, I finally told Greg. He didn't say much, just stared out the window and muttered. "People like that always think they're smarter than everyone else." Then he looked at me. "But you're not everyone else, Avenue. You don't just survive. You fight." And he was right. So I made a decision. I created a website. Not to shame Nolan, but to collect the stories, the fiancé file. A place where women and men could share their experiences, anonymous if they wanted, just the truth, just to be heard. Within a week, I had 8 submissions. By the end of the month, 32. From 4 different states, all of them described the same man, the same methods, the same VNISHINGS. It was a pattern. I added resources, therapy links, hotlines, financial recovery tips. It became more than just a warning sign. It became a community. But right as I started to feel proud, something happened. An email landed in my inbox. No subject line, no name, just one sentence: "You don't know what you've started." I froze, because it wasn't from Nolan's usual email. It was a burner. And I had no idea who sent it. Was it him, someone else, or someone worse? I read that line over and over again. "You don't know what you've started." It wasn't just a threat. It felt like a warning. But from who? Nolan, someone connected to him, or someone I hadn't uncovered yet. I checked the sender. Then Address was a random string of numbers, no name, no reply option, and worse, it had been routed through a privacy service. Whoever sent it didn't want to be found. I sat there staring at the screen while the coffee in my hand went cold. Cm I walked in and saw my face. What happened? I showed her the mail. She leaned in. Creepy, definitely him, but something told me it wasn't. Nolan didn't do subtle. When he was upset, he got emotional, dramatic. He left voicemails, wrote long messages, once even sent me a voice memo crying after a fight about dinner plans. This was calculated, clean, cold. And there was one more thing. I checked the emails, metadata, and traced the city. It wasn't coming from Nolan's last known location. It was from my city. Someone nearby was watching, or at least paying attention. I logged into the website to check traffic. That day alone, over 11,000 hits, mostly from Reddit, but one IP stood out: repeat visits, several clicks per minute, and multiple form submissions never completed. Same city as me. It was someone reading, watching, but not sharing their story. I decided to tighten security. I installed firewalls, hired a freelance web admin to monitor activity, locked down my social accounts. But still, I didn't sleep that night, because the longer I stared at that one sentence, the more it started to sound like a dare. The next morning, I went to the police again, this time with email. The IP trail, the screenshots. They were polite, but short, and fortunately, without a direct threat. We can't do much. I nodded. I understood, but inside, I was boiling. They always wait until something bad happens, then they react. But I wasn't going to wait. I started digging into Nolan's background again. Harder, not the lies he told me, but the holes he left behind. That's when I made a discovery that shook me. Remember that woman, Jenna, whose name was on one of the boxes in Nolan's storage unit? I found her. It took a deep dive into old forums and archived blog posts, but I found a single comment she made in 2021 on a support group thread. Her username matched an old email in one of Nolan's files. I messaged her, and she replied fast. At first, she was cautious, distant. But once I explained what happened to me and that her name was in Nolan's storage locker, she broke. She said, "I've been waiting for someone like you." We got on a call that night. She lived 2 hours north, used to be a student counselor, said she met Nolan during a grief retreat after losing her sister. He helped her feel again. That was his thing, swooping in when you were at your lowest. Then he moved in. Then came the money problems. Then the gaslighting. She finally kicked him out after finding a second phone in his backpack filled with photos of other women. But the day he left, he said something that haunted her for years. "You'll regret making this difficult." Those were almost the exact words I read in the email. My blood went cold. "Jenna," I asked, "do you think it was him?" She hesitated. "I don't think he works alone." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "There was someone else, a woman. She showed up after he left, said she was his cousin. But she kept asking about my job, my passwords, my family. It felt off. I think she was in on it." That's when my brain clicked. Braille. Could it have been her, or someone like her? Another partner Nolan used for information, access, and emotional leverage. This wasn't just a one-man pattern. It was a system. People like Nolan didn't thrive on luck. They thrived on enablers. Cmi, and I mapped everything out on her kitchen wall. Names, dates, cities, patterns. We started noticing overlaps. Women who said they were followed. Money that disappeared in similar ways. A company name that popped up into different stories. A small LLC in Nevada that shut down overnight. And then, something even crazier happened. The website received a submission from a new woman. Different state, never mentioned before. But the photos she uploaded, they included me. Screenshots from my Instagram. My posts, my porch, my brother in the background. She ended the submission with, "I think I'm next. I matched with him last month, but he won't stop talking about you." My hands shook. He wasn't done. Even after I exposed him, even after the site, the police, the women, he was still looking for someone new. Only this time he was using me to do it. A sick story. A broken man, playing the victim to get sympathy from his next target. I called Greg, told him everything. He was silent for a full minute. Then he said, "You need to end this, for all of us." And he was right. I had one move left, and I was going to use it. I set up a trap, one final post, one final sting. But what happened next, even I didn't expect. And now it's your turn. If you knew your ex was still out there hurting people, would you stop at justice, or go further? How far is too far? Asterisk. I wasn't going to let him choose the ending. He left me in a hospital parking lot. He lied to me, stole from me, used my brother's coma as cover. And now, he was still hunting, still manipulating, still using my face to get into someone else's Life. I knew one thing for sure, he didn't think I'd fight back. Not really. Not like this. So I baited the hook. I created a fake profile. Used a photo of someone I found through stock images, warm, approachable, slightly wounded. Just his type. I named her Kayla. I posted on a dating app Nolan had used before. Set the radius wide enough to catch him. It didn't take long. 2 days later, a match popped up, different name, different photo, but the bio almost identical. And the opening message, "Hey, you look kind, that's rare." It was him. I could feel it in my bones. So I played along. We talked for 4 days. I let him build the fantasy, the deep connection, the sob story. This time, it was his fiancée who cheated on him, said she'd run a smear campaign online to destroy his life. I listened, pretended to believe. Let him set the scene, his usual pattern. Then I asked to meet. Public place, daylight, cameras, witnesses. CMI and Greg waited nearby. I wore a hat and sat in the back corner of a cafe downtown. And then, he walked in. Same walk, same watch, same Wilfin boyfriend's clothing energy. But something was different. He looked smaller. Less polished. Like the internet had finally caught up to him and started dragging him down. He glanced around nervously. "Kayla," he asked. I stood up, took off the hat, his face drained of color. I smiled. "Avery." He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "Sit," I said, "or I call security." He sat. I pulled out a folder, dropped it on the table. Inside, printed stories from the website, photos, screenshots, emails, statements. Fraud reports, 32 women, 4 states, 1 predator. "You think you're smart," I said, "but you're lazy. You use the same lies, the same pitch, the same pattern, and now everyone sees it." His jaw clenched. "You don't get it." "No," I cut in. "You don't get it. You think we're disposable. You think women are just chapters in your personal drama. But this time, Nolan, we wrote the ending." I pulled out my phone. Hit record. He lunged to grab it too slow. That's when the cafe owner came over. "I'd suggest leaving," she said, "or the cops come in," because Cammy had told them everything. They were outside, waiting. Nolan stood up, chest puffed. "You think this ends me?" "No," I said. "You ended you." Then, a voice cut in behind us. "Actually, I'll take it from here." We turned. A woman stood there, mid-30s, calm, confident. Jenna. She'd driven in that morning without telling me, and in her hand, sealed folder. Official. Legal. "I filed a restraining order," she said, "and reported the LLC he used to scam my family. They're opening a case, statewide." She handed me a copy. I looked at Nolan. He looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. "You," he whispered. Yes," she said. "Me. And guess what? I'm not alone." At that moment, 5 other women stepped into the CFE. Acute. Not dramatic, not violent, just present. Together. Each holding a copy of the same folder. The look on his face, panic. He backed away, shaking his head. "You can't do this." "You did it," I said. The police stepped in. They didn't handcuff him, not yet, but they escorted him out. After asking him to answer a few questions about a long list of reports piling up under his name. As he walked past me, he hissed, "You don't know what's coming." I met his eyes. "I do," I said. Oblivion. He never looked back. The cafe burst into quiet applause. Not for the drama, but for the release. For every woman who never got closure. For every time he thought he'd gotten away with it. I sat back down, finally breathing again. Greg hugged me when I got outside. "You did it," he said. "No," I whispered. "We did." A week later, the site had over 100,000 visitors. News outlets picked it up. One headline read, "The Fiancé Fugitive, How 30 Women Took Down a Serial Love Scammer." Brio reached out again. But this time, to thank me. She had started therapy, was rebuilding her life, and told me she'd warned 3 other women since. It had become a ripple. What started as a betrayal had become a movement. I found my own apartment, painted the walls, hung a photo of Greg and me laughing on the porch. Every morning, I brewed coffee. Not Nolan's, mine. Because I was done living in someone else's shadow. He took 5 years from me, but I took his mask. And now, for once, everyone sees him for what he truly is. But here's my last question for you. After everything, if someone shattered your trust, your future, your identity, would you let it define you, or would you rise from it and make the world remember your name? I know what I chose. What would you choose? Asterisk.
That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought? Or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.